Well, it's been a while since we have done a News of the Week episode, and I know you're probably thinking why I don't do it every single week like I used to. Well, because there's been so many games that is happened in these last couple of weeks that I just simply had no time to do the News of the Week episode. But since this week's, we are heading into Decision Day, where it's not going to be happening until Sunday, and then of course I'll do the preview of all those Decision Day game on Saturday. In fact, I'll probably even split it into two separate video because I'll do the Eastern Conference preview of those Decision Day game and then the Western Conference preview of the Decision Day game as during Decision Day. That's how it's going to happen, with the Eastern Conference game kicking off at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. or actually no, not 4 p.m. Eastern, 3:30 p.m. Eastern, 12:30 p.m. Pacific, and then the Western Conference game all kicks off at 6 p.m. Eastern and 3 p.m. Pacific. But that being said, let us actually get into the news of the week. And there was definitely some news that happened in these past couple of days. In fact, we actually had a couple of news that came out of today. And that, of course, is a firing of a head coach, as the Houston Dynamo joined the numerous teams that have fired their head coach this season, as Tab Ramos, of course, become the latest victim. Though, would you say that it's kind of a firing when you realize that Tab Ramos, his contract was going to be out this year, and knowing the fact that, the Dynamo have already been eliminated not only from playoff contention, but their season is actually over with the way that they're the only team that's not going to be playing on Decision Day. You just kind of sense that, yeah, it's not really kind of a firing, but more like the Dynamo just saying, yeah, we're not renewing your contract heading into next season. And this is not a big surprise considering the fact that, I don't think Tab Ramos is a bad head coach. I think, given what he has done with the Dynamo, he hasn't really had the financial support and the backing of the front office to build a decent team. But that being said, do I think Tab Ramos is a decent head coach? Probably not. I think he's kind of average in some way, and this is kind of the case with a lot of young head coach, and especially with head coach that don't have MLS experience, where maybe they might not get it right the first time. And not to mention the fact that the other thing that's not surprising about this firing is that the Dynamo did officially announce their GM, and I kind of mentioned this before in the review, where they named Pat Onstad as their new GM of the Houston Dynamo, coming from the Columbus Crew. And I mentioned how I think this is a really good sign and consider of what Pat Onstad did with the Columbus Crew and building that team that ends up winning the MLS Cup just a couple of years after he was there. Now, I'm not saying if he can maybe replicate this same success with a Dynamo, because I think when you look at this Dynamo team, he's got a lot to cut out in his hand to trying to get this team competitive again. But there's no doubt that, with a new GM, anytime when that happened, usually the head coach, especially the one that is not doing well, is probably going to get fired. And hence this is kind of no surprise that once Pat Onstad is the new GM of this team, there's no doubt that Tab Ramos' time to of becoming the Houston Dynamo head coach was coming to end. And like I said, he was just announced today that he's been firing from the team, and now it's going to be interesting to see where he goes next, because right now, despite the fact that we have a lot of head coach turnover this season, it's going to be interesting in the offseason of whether or not if those coaches that's been fired by their respective team might go to another MLS team, because it has happened before where we've seen head coach that might be been fired, but maybe other team want to give a shot in terms of it. And we'll see whether or not if Tat Ramos is going to get another opportunity in MLS, or maybe get an opportunity as an assistant head coach. And it's for the Dynamo, they're going to be joining a huge list of teams that, this season, I have a feeling we're going to have a lot of teams that is going to be looking for a head coach. And that could be something that could be difficult, because, when you have so many teams that need a head coach, there's going to be some competition in terms of getting some of the best one. And we shall see whether or not if the Dynamo can get it right heading into the offseason now. Moving on in terms of the next news is that CF Montreal president Kevin Gilmore is no longer the president of the team after he announced his resignation and decided to step down, which that has to be the biggest victory for Montreal fans this season. I mean, Montreal fans are still looking forward for their team to hopefully make it to the playoffs, but this must be the feeling of winning like an MLS Cup, because we know how Montreal fans have been showing their frustration over Kevin Gilmore. I mean, they even and I think the Ultra even talked about how upset they were over Kevin Gilmore, especially getting rid of the Impact name and decided to rename the name to CF Montreal. And now that he's no longer there, it's also going to be interesting to see whether or not if Montreal is going to go back to their original name. I mean, I know there's been saying that the rebrand is probably not or another rebrand is not going to happen with this team, but we shall see. We've seen before where sometimes when you have a rebrand and it kind of upsets the fan base and in some way kind of alien your fan base. With new ownership, they quickly decided to change that. Like, just look at the Chicago Fire, where their fans was very upset with the rebrand that they did. And although there was not new ownership, at least that ownership kind of listened to the fans and eventually kind of reverted into a new rebrand. So we'll see whether or not if Montreal is going to decide to do that, and whether or not indeed they're going to maybe even go back to their old logo or just create a new one and probably rename themselves the Montreal Impact, because like I said before, it is still very weird to call this team CF Montreal. And I can't tell you how many times this season when I watch a Montreal game, how many times I have seen either visiting broadcaster or even the home broadcaster trying to call them the Montreal Impact, because that's the name that this team has been ever since its inception. And it's kind of a shame the fact that they decided to change the name, and that it's no surprise that the fans were very upset at what Kevin Gilmore decided to do. And I think Kevin Gilmore kind of did the right thing to step down, because when you have been hated by pretty much everybody in your fan base, it's best for you to step down before things gets even more uglier. So we shall see who is going to be the new president of this team, and whether or not if they're going to go back to their own name, the Montreal Impact. Now, moving on, in terms of next news, is that there is a report by Taylor Twellman suggesting that the Chicago Fire has already told 6 regular starters that they will not be back heading into next year. Now, keep in mind, the Chicago Fire still have one more game left this season, and even though they're already eliminated, they're not in the same case as the Houston Dynamo, where their season is over. And in some way, they are being very early in terms of announcing who is going to be staying and who is going to leave, and it almost feels like they already announced their end of season roster. But we'll see who exactly is going to be those 6 regular starter. I was told that one of those guys could be Francisco Calvo, who he's not going to be traveling with the team. And actually, originally when Taylor Twellman report this, he says that those 6 regular starters weren't actually going to make the travel to Columbus for their final game of the season. But then Taylor Twellman just basically kind of went revert of what he says, and he says that now there's news reports suggesting that those 6 regular starters minus Francisco Calvo is not going to be going, or minus Francisco Calvo is actually going to be going to the final game. And obviously Calvo is not going to be going to the final game because he is going to be going to Costa Rica for international duty for World Cup qualifying. So yeah, we shall see who exactly are these kind of players that's not going to be part of this team. And again, this Fire team, you just had a sense that they're going to try to blow it up again. I mean, they try to maybe mash into a decent team in these last 2 years, and it just haven't worked out whatsoever. So really, that the only option is instead of just maybe improving it, they're probably just going to blow it up again. And not to mention, speaking of rebrand, they're going to go with that new rebrand and look to once again start another new era for this team. I won't be surprised there's going to be a lot of move that this Chicago Fire team is going to make this off season. Now, moving on, in terms of next news, in terms of injury news, there is some good news and bad news if you're in New England, as there is sources saying that Adam Buksa will be out 3 weeks due to a knee injury. So the good news for Revs fans is that at least Buksa is probably going to come back before playoff time starts, and not to mention the fact that the Revs are going to have at least a couple of extra days with them clinching the number 1 seed and getting that bye. They don't have to worry about the fact that they might be playing in a playoff game without Adam Buksa. But the bad news is Adam Buksa is still suffering from a knee injury, and it's going to be interesting to see will he be 100% healthy enough to play in that second round playoff game and in their first playoff games on their road to MLS Cup, because we know that Adam Buxall is very important to this Revs team, and especially one of the start of this Revs team this season, and you can sense that they just cannot afford to lose him, especially in the playoffs if they want to make a deep playoff run. But like I said, the report saying that it's only 3 weeks, and it looks like most likely he is going to come back to this Revs team before the playoffs started. Now, Sporting KC defender Amadou Dia has been suspended 1 game by Disco due to that serious foul play that he put on Reynoso, which I don't think this should surprise everybody. We knew this was coming, and the only thing that I'm frustrated about this, at least in a Loons fan's perspective, is that we've seen this before, where eventually Disco would suspend a player after the game is over. But why exactly do the referee and do Pro not actually decide to just kind of maybe give the red card on the spot? I mean, we saw this kind of happen before with Tim Melia, where he decided to do a WWE move on Christian Rodin, and then eventually Disco said, yeah, basically we saw our referee got it wrong, so we're just going to suspend 1 game. I mean, eventually justice is served, but in some way it feels really frustrating, the fact that justice could have easily been served during the game itself. And like I said, that tackle from Amadou Dia, I haven't heard anything about whether or not if Reynoso is going to be available, and I'm finger crossed that he is actually available, because he did kind of came off and kind of limping a little bit after that challenge that Amadou Dia suffered. And yeah, it's just incredibly frustrating, the fact that why couldn't they just do it during the game instead of have to now kind of almost using a sorry excuse of saying, yeah, we got that one wrong, so just to kind of make it up for it, we're just going to suspend him for 1 games and stuff like that. But now moving on, in terms of the next news, is that there is a report suggesting that the 2022 MLS season is actually going to be starting on February 26th, and I believe I forgot who exactly reported this, but there was legitimate source that of course is the case. So if that is the situation, that means the off season is going to be really, really short, because remember the MLS Cup is going to end around December, and knowing the fact that next season starts in February, and also next year is a World Cup year, and I think MLS is determined to try to finish the season before the World Cup begin in November. I mean, it still sounds weird, the fact that the World Cup is happening in November, but I guess that's another discussion for another day of FIFA basically controversially still sticking with the situation of having the World Cup in Qatar, and basically have to force to move it to the winter time. But yeah, I again, the reason why I think MLS wants to start their season early is to not just get back to the usual kind of format where the season starts in February and it will end in November before the international break, but knowing the fact that the World Cup is going to be next year and it's starting in November, they want to get it done before that, of course, happening, because the last thing they want to do is to not only have the World Cup happening, but also there's going to be playoffs that is going to be happening at the same time, and you want to know how much that would piss off a lot of MLS team, of the fact that, we're in the playoffs right now. Oh wait, we can't have some of our most important players because they're all participating in the World Cup in Qatar right now. But moving on, in terms of the last news on the news of the week, is probably the biggest news coming out of this week, or coming out of today, besides the Tab Ramos firing. And that, of course, is the U.S. men's national team has officially announced the 25-man roster. Well, to be specific, Gregg Berhalter has announced the 25-man roster for the November World Cup qualifying. And no doubt that the November World Cup qualifying is one, if not the most important part of the World Cup qualifying for the U.S., because that's when they get to play against Mexico at home, and a lot of people have been waiting to see who exactly is going to make the cut in terms of being on the roster and playing against Mexico in Cincinnati just a couple of days. So this is basically the 25-man roster, as in goal. We got Sean Johnson, Zach Steffen, and Matt Turner, which has pretty much been the goalkeeping roster for these last 3 World Cup qualifying. But then getting into the defense, this is where things kind of change a little bit. You got Reggie Cannon coming back into this team, followed by Mark McKenzie, Chris Richer, Anthony Robinson, Miles Robinson, and then Joe Scally getting a chance to be in the the U.S. men's national team and potentially getting his first ever cap for the national team. And, you know, I haven't heard a lot about how Joe Scally has been doing overseas ever since he was signed with Borussia Mönchengladbach from NYCFC. But from what I heard, he's been a very promising player for Mönchengladbach, and that you know, like the fact that, you know, the U.S. didn't forget about him. Of how I remember a couple of years when he was with NYCFC, this kid was the real deal. Like, definitely has a lot of potential, not only to go to Europe but also be a U.S. men's national team player. And here we are, finally see him getting a chance, and we'll see whether or not if he's going to play some part for this team. Then you got Sam Vines also coming back from the national team picture, followed by DeAndre Yedlin and Walker Zimmerman. In the midfield, you got Kellen Acosta, Tyler Adams, Gianluca Busio, Sebastian Lletget, Weston McKennie, Yunus Musa, and Christian Rodin. So almost a very similar kind of midfield. Oh, speaking of defense, one player that is actually not going to be in this roster that is notable is Sean Brooks and Serginho Dest, though. Before U.S. men's national team fans are going to lose their heads of why exactly both of those players are not in the roster. Well, technically, when they saw this roster, I guarantee if you go to U.S. men's national team Twitter page, which I do not recommend you to do so, they're going to lose their heads because of how bad this lineup is. It's just the case with how they always tends to be kind of like a doomer and just kind of criticize Berhalter every time the roster it is. And this is also the reason why I do not recommend you to visit that Twitter page. And if you do visit, do at your own risk, because there's going to be so much doomer thinking that things that they're definitely going to be losing, and it's an automatic L that they're going to be facing against Mexico and Cincinnati in a couple of days. But, you know, going back to talking about why those two players are not on the roster, well, because both of them are injured. So that's kind of the reason. It's not the fact that they've been doing very badly. It's just because, you know, with them being injured, they're not able to be in the national team. But going forward in terms of on the attack, you got Brendan Aronson, Paul Arriola, Jesus Ferreira, Ricardo Pepi, Christian Pulisic, and Tim Vey in the starter. Obviously, it's great to see Pulisic back in the U.S. men's national team roster, and there's no doubt that he's going to be definitely starting for the U.S. in that game against Mexico. But one notable player that is not in the forward group is going to be Jarzy Zardes, and you know, I think there's also some criticism of the fact that when you look at this forward roster, yeah, it's not really that strong. I mean, especially in that number 9 position, where I feel like it is pretty clear that, you know, Gregg Berhalter has officially jumped into the Ricardo Pepi hype train. Because really, when you look at this forward group, I really think Pepi is really the only one that really can fit into that mold. And, you know, I was kind of surprised that Berhalter decided to choose that, because knowing the fact that Berhalter tends to love his Columbus player, I would think that he was going to choose Jarzy Zardes over Pepi. But he gave Pepi a chance, and he's been blossoming with this team. And now, you know, this is going to be interesting to see how is, you know, while he's definitely been blossom early in his national team career, can he keep it up, and can he keep this consistency, and also now having the pressure that he's now going to be the main guy going forward for this team, and see whether or not if he can continue that goal scoring form that he's been with the national team and also with FC Dallas this season. But yeah, there you have it. That is pretty much it for my news of the week video, and also talking about the 25-man roster. Also subject to change in terms of the 25-man roster, because, you know, case if there is some situation where, you know, all these players, I think they're going to be playing one more time before they join the national team and playing for their club level. And, you know, God forbid, hopefully everybody stay healthy, but in case if there is going to be an injury in terms of some of these players, we could definitely see some changes in the 25-man roster. But until then, that of course is the roster for the crucial World Cup qualifying part, where in these next 2 games the U.S. gets to play against Mexico at home and Jamaica on the road. But like I said, let me know in the comments below what do you think of the roster, and also let me know in the comments below what do you think of the news that happened in the last couple of days. And if there's any news I didn't mention on the board, let me know in the comments below. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys hit like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next